Hey everyone! Today we're going to dig deep and pull out some amazing gems to save you time and effort in your scene and character generation. This includes some must-have adherence boosters. We're going to go through WaveSpeed and TeaCache, but not just flipping it on, why it works and what to look out for, plus several other tips and tricks. We're going to talk through dynamic prompts using Wildcards, and expert mode in the Mile High Styler, and more. Thank you so much as always for liking, subscribing, and sharing. I really appreciate you, and I'm so glad that you are sharing on social media, Reddit, and elsewhere. Also, here comes a new intro sequence. So enjoy, and let's get to it. Okay, so we're going to start off with a tip today. Yeah, you thought I was going to put the tip at the very end like usual. We're going to switch it up a little bit. So many times you'll download a new model or a LoRa, and you want to get it quickly into your workflow. But previously, you may have had to refresh the entire page, or you may have had to restart Comfy completely in order to start to see that LoRa or that model. And so now I found a cool shortcut. Basically, if you hit R, in the top right corner, you'll see an update request and those node definition updates, and it'll immediately be available. Now, if you hit R and nothing happens, if you go into your Comfy settings under key binding and search for refresh, it's going to be right here. So you can set it to actually whatever you want, but standard is R. And going into cache. So TeaCache and WaveSpeed are now picking up speed, haha. So what it essentially does is Flux has many big blocks, right? About 30 something blocks. And each block has a different function. Some are around the main subject, some are around the background, details, effects, etc., etc. And the first major block is around the subject. And so many times when you're doing your rendering, you will be using the same subject over and over again. So the nice thing about this caching is that it will store it in memory what those subjects are to try to speed up not having to think it out every single time. And so in both cases, in this case, I use WaveSpeed. It has a ratio, and that ratio is basically how much that first block should be stored in memory. And, by default, it might be a higher number. I've seen to have very little, if any, change. I would reduce it all the way down to 0.05, basically 5%. And you'll see there's very little difference in the actual output, but you will get the gain of a little speed bump. Now, when you do your image to image, you can boost this up quite a bit because you already have your main subject in play. So I actually beefed it up to about 0.2, even higher, depending on the situation. And every model, by the way, is a little bit different. When you have it a little higher, it greatly speeds up your image to image process. So same deal with TeaCache as well. It starts up with a larger 0.4, I believe, number. I keep it down to about 0.2. That seems to work really well. And again, something you should play with. Same thing also with video. So for TeaCache, there's a specific node for video, and you can choose between Hunyun and the LTX video models. Previously, the LTX wasn't working quite right. It was erroring out, but I think they're almost done resolving it if they haven't already resolved it already. It's the same concept. And in order to hook it up, you could just see it's basically model to model. When you do your load diffusion model, all you'll do is you'll hook it up through or hook it up through. I wouldn't chain them together. I've tried that and it just brings up garbage. So I would choose one of the methods here. Both of them are going to give you pretty good results. You can see even in my loader, I've now added as default a WaveSpeed node, and you can see I have it down by that 0.05. But again, you can play with that number, right? Sometimes if you go to 0.08, 0.09, it still looks okay, but you, again, to your own effect and to what you're looking to achieve. Okay, next, we're going to talk about dynamic prompts. So many times you're going to want to create a set of images where you may have the same subject or same type of situation or same background or whatever that might be, or you may want to just have a completely random prompt every time. And so, of course, you can use Ollama like we've had in previous videos, but Ollama or the LLMs take a pretty good chunk of memory. So Wildcards have been around for a while, and they're very, very easy to use, and it's actually a very low memory, very quick operation to use. Different nodes have it. I actually like the chibi ones. So if you download that custom node from Comfy Manager, and essentially it's 2 nodes, right? You basically have a prompt builder, and then you have your wildcard. These wildcards are actually located in your custom nodes under Chibi extras and these Chibi wildcards, and they're basically just lists of things, right? So in my foods one, I just have a whole list. By the way, a quick tip to quickly generate these elements is to use GPT. You can ask GPT for 50, types of castles, and you can have a castles text. So very, very simple to do in terms of the format. And so coming back here, the wildcards you're going to create, you can give it any sort of keyword you want. This is basically how it's going to know to swap things out. And additionally, you can have the number of items returned. Now, it's not going to put it in, let's say, a comma list. However, in your text file, you could put, for example, bananas, comma, and it'll just bring it right through. In fact, you could have a list of just prompts, full prompts, and then you can basically bring your clip in and then bring the conditioning directly into your sampler. So you don't actually have to build text files or do any sort of fancy text manipulation. You could basically just have a text file just full of prompts and take it that way. In this case, we're going to use foods just to demonstrate. I'm starting with prompts, and in this case, I'm going to just build a very, very basic one. Okay, and as you can see, and then I bring in my wildcard that's going to be substituted at the end here. So you can actually chain this all the way through. You can have multiple wildcard nodes, and you're just basically chaining text to text to text to text to text all the way out. But in this case, we're just going to show the text to show you what it looks like. And you can see it basically replaced, and if I refresh, it's replacing that wildcard, that kind of placeholder, with the placeholder that I've identified here. So very, very easy way to build really cool dynamic prompts. Everything from your character, hairstyle, even race or background, what objects they're holding or what they're sitting on. It's a very easy way to build very dynamic images because you have really a lot of variety that you can introduce into your prompt building. Next, we're going to return back to Mile High Styler. Now, as you know, in pretty much every single video, I have been using Mile High Styler forever, but I've been using it in a much more basic way. I had my prompt. In SCXL, I was using my negative prompt, and then I was choosing a style, and all is good. Now, of course, as we've talked before, the Mile High Styler puts some pre-text and post-text based on the style that you've chosen, which is great because you can basically edit it yourself. If you get the latest version of Mile High Styler, there's actually 3 different versions of styles that are located. I've been using the classic all the way through, but if you go to the second version, you can see there's a whole bunch of different additional styles that were actually put together. And then if we go to the third one, a very different set of styles that were also put together. So it's actually pretty cool that you have a few different options there. Now, let's say you've played with this for a while and you've come up with a prompt that has a style set of pre-text and post-text that you want to be able to include or even edit existing ones. So to make modifications or additions, you're going to go to your custom nodes Mile High Styler, and under data, you're going to have all the different data files. Now, you can see you have Mile High Styler 1, 2, 3. So if you want to modify those specific node styles, you can go into any of these files. Now, the format of these styles are JSON. So it's not just a simple list. It is a little bit more complex, but not significantly complex. You can see if I look all the way down this list, it basically follows the same pattern all the way through, right? You're giving it a name. That's the label that's in the dropdown. And then you have a prompt, which is the text that's happening before your prompt. You're having this little keyword, almost like a wildcard, right? With the actual prompt itself. And then you have your post text as well. And you can obviously provide both for the prompt as well as the negative prompt. So very, very easy to do some quick tweaks here of existing styles if you want. You can actually create additional ones to add as well. So you have a lot of power here to modify the existing stuff. Now, here's the fun part. Here's the advanced part. You can create your own custom styles. And so what I mean by that, so if I go back to the data folder here, you can see there's a whole bunch of just subfolders that are not part of the Mile High Styler kind of core nodes, if you want to call it that. They're like everything else here. So let's say, for example, I see banana styles, right? So banana styles has a bananas JSON file, again, similar to what we've seen format-wise. So what does that mean? Well, in this case, if I search for bananas, you can see I have a specific custom styler just for bananas. So think of how you can extend this. If you have specific styles that you have built yourself, that you don't want part of the very long list of styles that are part of the core Mile High stylers, you can create your own nodes basically of styles, which again follows the same sort of pattern we have here. And just as an example, right, if I were to have my dog walking in a park, just to show you real life, and I wanted to choose, let's say, absurdist theater, why not? And I go to that positive prompt. If I run it, you can see absurdist theater is part of the pretext in that JSON file, dog walking in the park, and then comma, and all this extra information is the append at the end. So that happens here as well. So you have a lot of power here to build it out. Now, the one caveat to keep in mind, if you're making changes to an existing style or adding additional ones in the Mile High set of nodes, or you decide to create a subfolder and create your own JSON file for that styler, is that it won't take effect until you restart Comfy. And so that's a little different than that refresh shortcut that we did earlier, because the creation of these styles being put in memory is happening on the initial load of Comfy. So just to keep in mind, again, you can create as many styles as you want, but you're not going to be able to see the effects of it until you actually restart Comfy fully. So next, we're going to talk about this one-step amazing discovery. Now, many times you're going to do a prompt and you're going to render that out. And if you're using Efficient Case Sampler, for example, you're going to see the renders happen almost real time. And after the first step or so, all of a sudden, what looked like a really great start, even though it's very rough, it starts to render in a very different direction. It's not going to include necessarily all the things from an adherence perspective that you're expecting. And so like if I'm, for example, running this prompt right here, which is a beautiful rose sitting under a glass jar, okay, you're going to see, oh, it starts out really great. And then, oh, all of a sudden, like, you know, these extra mountains are coming up, and maybe there's things that I didn't think were going to be included, but now start to render into the picture, right? And so if we paused back to what that first frame looked like, it was starting down the right path and again, rendering a very different way. And so what I discovered was if we only render the very first step, but then we bring it into a custom sampler and we start the rendering for the custom sampler on step 2. So it's basically not starting with the first render point. It's taking your existing render point and then using that to finish off the rest of the render. It comes up with a very different result. And, you know, from a parameter perspective or a speed perspective, you're still doing the same number of steps, right? In the first case, we were doing 8 steps to start, but it was doing it fully. Now we're doing the first step here, and then steps 2 through 8 over here. And so I have found over and over and over again, this is a game changer in terms of getting a better level of adherence to your prompts when you're rendering. So I'm probably going to be modifying my loader in the future to incorporate this. Now on to our bonus. So many of you have seen we've been using Use Everywhere, the Anything Everywhere suite for quite some time, right? We've been shooting, you know, different variables and data attributes all over our workflows, and it's been great. It's been very, very efficient. But sometimes you will want to have your stuff beam to only one specific area and use it that same name to beam to another area. So I have a perfect example here of a dog jumping into a pool. And so all the parameters are the same, except I want to vary the number of steps. So in the standard way, I just want to go for a total of 10 steps. But I want to do a more advanced sort of flow, even though it's not super, super advanced, with 5 steps and then 5 steps. And you can of course accomplish this by renaming, as we've done before, right? You could rename that input steps normal and steps advanced. And that would definitely solve it, right? You would have 2 different items, one called steps normal and steps advanced. But what I discovered was, to simplify the viewing of these inputs, you can actually call it the same thing. So in this case, you could see I have steps, steps, steps. And how am I varying this? By the name of the group that it's in. So here I have standard flow and advanced flow. So in my everything everywhere, I have steps and steps, but this time I'm going to vary it by the group name, standard flow and advanced flow. And it works great. And you can see, by the way, and this is obviously a benefit of having a 2-pass render process, is, the dog jumping out of the pool is great. It's a good shot. But going 5 and 5, same number of steps, it's much more dynamic, right? Look at the splashes, look at the level of detail. And I'm basically doing almost like a little image to image, right? I'm doing 5 steps for the main subject area, and then I'm denoising half, right? And you can, of course, play with this, more creativity, less creativity, as we've done many, many times before. But the level of detail and the crispness of the output is fantastic. And just to wrap up the example, right? Obviously, we were doing steps across 2 different groups. So you have 2 different groups listed here. You can combine that process with your normal way of doing everything everywhere as well. So you can see I'm using a new variable called global seed. I'm just tossing a seed in there, and I'm using global seed for all 3. It's a great advantage of using this custom node system that you have a lot of power in specifically targeting areas for your stuff. Thanks so much again for sharing and subscribing and sending to all your friends. This has really, really been an amazing journey, and I really appreciate all of your great feedback. Feel free to jump into the Discord and we can talk and share art as we do every day. Find tips and tricks, support your guys. If you have any questions, also, if you have any live training needs, obviously you can go to grokster.com as well. But otherwise, we'll talk to you soon.